This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jansen. This show, of course, always live, broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, we're also live on YouTube right now with the whole show, always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Today, well, we look at the SADC meeting that's in Durban, set to deal with the issue of xenophobia, amongst other things. Then we get an update on the crises in Burundi and the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. We look at the hashtag Swazi Justice after pro-justice campaigners were freed there last week. And we close with an update on the taxi situation in Pretoria. We'll also talk to the mayor of the city of Tshwane on the taxi crisis in Mamelodi. But first, let's take a look at today's news. Police in Mamelodi have impounded dozens of minibus taxis this morning in a bid to halt violence against a new bus operator. Autopacked buses that transport commuters to various destinations in Mamelodi are operating under police supervision. This comes after provincial and local leaders, as well as representatives of the Taxi Association and community members, attended a meeting there yesterday. The aim of the meeting was to resolve the standoff over bus routes that left 5 people injured and several buses damaged during the chaos that erupted over the last 7 days. Xenophobia will be at the top of the agenda of a Southern African Development Community Forum that starts in KwaZulu-Natal today. 14 members of SADC are meeting at the coastal resort of Zimbali, north of Durban, to focus on industrialization, regional integration and the role of parliaments in the SADC region. The parliamentarians are set to have a deeper discussion around xenophobia, as well as migration, human rights issues and strong governance. Suspended Independent Police Investigative Directorate head Robert McBride is expected to make a formal application to his disciplinary hearing today for the stay of proceedings pending a court challenge. This follows McBride's suspension from the IPID in March because he allegedly cleared former Hawks boss Anwar Dramat and Gauteng Hawks boss Shadrack Sibea of allegations of their involvement in the rendition of 5 Zimbabwean nationals in 2010. Egypt's military launched airstrikes and ground operations that killed more than 25 militants in the North Sinai yesterday. This as the country struggles with an insurgency based in that region. State fighters attacked several military checkpoints in the Sinai last week during heavy fighting that killed more than 100 people, one of the biggest terrorist strikes in Egypt's modern history. Soldiers, policemen, civilians and terrorists were amongst the dead. Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis has resigned. This comes after Greece took to the polls yesterday with 61% of the people voting no, rejecting the terms of a bailout that international lenders have offered. Thousands of supporters of the no campaign are today celebrating in front of Parliament in Athens. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says the outcome is not a vote against Europe, but rather a mandate for negotiating a viable solution to the debt crisis. Then taking a look at South African sports from the weekend, an unbeaten knock of 79 runs from Faf du Plessis, coupled with an astute bowling performance, saw South Africa beat Bangladesh by 52 runs in the first of 2 T20 internationals. South Africa elected to bat first, scoring a modest 148 for 4 in their 20 overs on a pitch devoid of any life. The Proteas then restricted their hosts to just 96 all out in the penultimate over. And sprinter Henrico Brenkies set a new South African record in the 100 meters for men yesterday. The South African won the 100 meters at the International Resi Sprint meeting in Switzerland in a time of 9.97 seconds. This performance by Brenkies comes just 4 days after Akani Simbine won the 100 meters at the 20th European Athletics Classics meeting in Slovenia in a time of 9.99 seconds. Their countryman Wade van Niekerk also set a new African and South African record in the 400 meters in last night's Diamond League meeting in the French capital, Paris. Now, 14 members of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, are meeting in the coastal resort of Zimbali, north of Durban. They're meeting under the theme Industrialization and Regional Integration and the Role of Parliaments in the SADC region. Now, for more on this gathering, we cross to our reporter Blaine Herman, who is with an independent analyst, Bheki Mngomezulu. A very good morning to you, Blaine. Before you carry on with your interview, just set the scene for us.
Yeah, good morning, Evan. Good morning, everybody. We're live from northern KwaZulu-Natal, Zimbali, as it's better known, and it's here for an important gathering, the 37th Plenary Assembly of the Southern African Development Community's Parliamentary Forum. Indeed, it's a mouthful. What is that, you ask? Well, it's basically a platform for parliaments and parliamentarians to look at ways of improving as well as promoting regional integration in the SADC region. Now, this is done through parliamentary involvement. When we talk about regional integration, we're basically talking about agreements and partnerships between neighboring states, and this could range between social, economic, as well as political cooperation. Now, as you mentioned, 14 members of SADC are present, represented largely by the speakers of the various parliaments, and including South Africa. We have Mauritius, Mozambique, Malawi, there's Angola, Botswana, the DRC, Lesotho, very topical at the moment, Namibia, Tanzania, the Seychelles, Zambia, Zimbabwe, as well as Swaziland. And they're all here trying to, well, cement relations, one would say, as well as look at ways to better the lives, the citizens' lives in the Southern African Development Community region. Let's take this further now and get more insight. Independent analyst Dr. Bheki Mngomezulu joins me now live to discuss this and other issues. Doctor, thank you very much indeed for your time. You know, we've been talking the whole morning about how important this is, especially in the context of South Africa as well. We're talking about how foreign nationals are treated here. That's one of the topics of discussion. An important forum to have at this time.
Absolutely important because if you look at South Africa since 1994, there's been a change. In the past, South Africa was regarded as a pariah state in the African continent and globally as well. But since 1994, we've turned the tables and we are now becoming, others say we are a hegemon in the Southern African region, and others say no, we have not been accorded that status yet. But be that as it may, South Africa has played a critical role in terms of addressing conflict situations on the African continent. You mentioned Sudan, you mentioned DRC, Lesotho, Mozambique, everywhere. Basically, we've made our presence felt. But then, unfortunately, in 2008 and then once again in 2015, we've seen foreign nationals being attacked in what was affectionately known as xenophobic attacks, which I usually refer to as Afrophobic attack, because the majority of the people who were affected were Africans. So now having this meeting at this time then is very critical, because then South Africa has to rescue its image in a way, while at the same time trying to address some of the problems that are affecting the region.
Let's just look at the theme for this parliamentary forum. It's pretty loaded. It's called Industrialization and Regional Integration of the SADC, the Role of Parliaments. What are the role of parliaments?
Yeah, the theme is very crucial, because for any law to take place, in the first instance, laws are crafted by Parliament. And therefore, for those laws to be implemented, then Parliament has to play an important role. So in this case, if you talk about regional integration, and then you talk about development, you talk about the movement of people, all are important issues if the region is to be united. So therefore, it's important that parliamentarians from the region come together and craft the way forward, so that at least they read from the same script. Because the problem is that given that in the past we're operating in silos, we now have to operate as a region, so that when we talk to the outside community, outside of the African continent, then we'll be speaking in one voice. So then this regional body is therefore very important for that, and Parliament has a critical role to play in terms of leading the discussions.
There's also a push for a regional parliament, a platform that will mirror the work done by SADC, also make sure that policies and plans that are taken at a regional level will be transformed into domestic law. Do you think that will better serve the region?
Yes, it's supposed to serve the region, but then that is not an easy job to do. If, for example, we take an example of what happened in East Africa in what was called the East Africa Legislative Assembly, which had Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania following the merger of Tanganyika and Zanzibar in 1964. So then the East Africans tried to form a regional parliament that only worked in that particular area. But there were a number of problems which then resulted into the East African community being disbanded in 1977, having been established in 1967. So while it is important to have a regional parliament, we first have to find out what the issues are, issues of national importance, which might then derail the entire process. So then meetings like these are very important because then they will preempt what is likely to happen and then try to do things the right way.
Independent analyst Dr. Becky Mgomezulu, thank you very much indeed for your time. Eben, lots to discuss here throughout the day. We'll be trying to bring you live the addresses by, I understand, Naledi Pandor. Minister Naledi Pandor will be giving the keynote address, as well as the National Assembly Speaker, Baleka Mbete. When that happens, we'll be crossing to it live, so do stay tuned to Channel 404. Eben.
Thank you very much, Blaine Herman. That's our very own reporter, Blaine Herman, coming to you live there from Zimbabwe, just north of Durban. He'll keep us updated throughout the rest of the day as what's happening there. Moving north on the continent, Burundi yesterday rejected a second UN diplomat tasked to help resolve the country's political crisis. Abdoulaye Batili was told to resign from his post because he seriously lacked respect for the country's sovereignty. Batili was sent to Burundi a month ago to replace UN mediator Said Djinnit, an Algerian diplomat who was branded as too pro-government by civil society activists. The country has been in turmoil since April, following the announcement that President Pierre Nkurunziza will bid for a third term in office there. Now, since then, dozens of people have been killed and over 140,000 displaced, fleeing the country. Now, for an update, the latest on Burundi, we're joined by Asia Suleiman, who is the director of news at the Voice of Nigeria. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
Could you give us an update? What is the very latest coming out of Nigeria? Burundi,
well,
that is.
Nigeria is unfortunate that, yes, last night we had the misfortune of a bomb blast killing at least 40 people in the central Nigerian city of Jos. And people were receiving Islamic lessons before the breaking of fast, and some gunmen rammed into them, shot and killed people in Jos. And before then, on Saturday, there were also bomb blasts in northeastern Nigeria, where people were killed in a church. So these are fortunate things that are happening in Nigeria this morning. We are morning mode this morning because deaths in Jos and in Pakistan are quite fortunate.
If we can move our attention to Burundi, can you tell us that East African regional states, they are meeting today in Tanzania to try and find a solution to the crisis in Burundi. Do you know if President Pierre Nkurunziza will be attending and what the possible outcomes of this meeting would be?
The stand of President Nkurunziza is so hard that it will be difficult for him to attend because the African Union has turned down the request for them to monitor the parliamentary elections that took place on the 29th, and the call on him not to stand for a third term. It is very, very difficult for him to attend this meeting. I don't know what's wrong with African leaders. In Africa, once your tenure ends, you want to extend your tenure by unconstitutional means. And I don't expect that President listen to the voice of people, because it is said popularly that the voice of the people is the voice of God. Everybody, the US, the African Union, the European Union, everybody calling on President Caesar to step down, but he is not agreeing. The claims are that he was president, or he was elected by the parliament, not the majority of the Burundian people. Yeah. And for that, actually, he needs to really listen to the popular call, the popular vote by people. People are dying because of his own personal interest. And the African SABC, the South African Development Commission, and the African should make a stand and announce and tell him cut off all ties and all aid from him until he agrees to follow constitutional. Otherwise, the president that involved the country that ended in 2005 will again fail.
Mr. Suleiman, unfortunately, our line is very bad. I have to apologize on behalf of Mr. Azia Suleiman, who's the Director of News at the Voice of Nigeria. The line just drops. It's almost it's inaudible, really. We'll try and get an update on the situation again there tomorrow, and maybe, our technology will allow us to have a better interview, at least something that is a little bit more audible. But let's move on to the Greek no vote that won the referendum there, with over 61% of voters saying no to the Eurozone's terms for the country remaining in the single currency last night. Now, what are you saying about this? What are people saying around the world about what's happening in Greece? All the European economies are on high alert because it will directly affect all of them. The money is owned to mostly French and German banks. Mehul Pandita says, I don't have money, so give me money. But I won't listen to anything you say. Greece is the teenage child of Europe, says Mehul. It's not as simplistic as that, unfortunately. Dominic Jennings says, why, following the Greek referendum, can we only talk about the markets of speculation? Yes, there's a sober thought. Balaji J says, bold move from the citizens clearly shows they're not depending on the politicians anymore. Hashtag Greek referendum there. Terence Singh says, Greek actually celebrating this? It requires real courage to celebrate when you have so many billions of debt to repay. And Champagne says, Greek referendum, note to self, don't let a communist manage my finances. He says, is it as simplistic as that? What are your views? At SABC Newsroom is where you can send it. Today's pick of the day, well, it comes from Chavez, and it's captioned. There you have the picture. Greek voters deliver a stunning rebuke to austerity. Yes, tightening the belts. That's what we hear all day long here in South Africa. We need to tighten our belts. Now, what's the tweet of the day? Tweet of the day comes from Susan, saying, capitalists have forgotten what they used to know. People with nothing to lose are free to do and say what they like. Talking about the Greek referendum. Of course, they voted no there yesterday, and it's reverberating around Europe this morning because not only the Greek economy is at risk, but several other economies in Europe at risk as well, including the currency. Let's now take a look at the front pages from around the world. We start in China. The South Morning China Post reports Greeks voted overwhelmingly yesterday to reject terms of a bailout, risking financial ruin in a show of defiance that could splinter Europe. We move to the UK. The Daily Telegraph also leads with that story. The European Union was last night facing its worst crisis since the formation of the euro after Greece voted decisively against accepting the terms of its Eurozone bailout deal. And finally, in Europe, the Times reports George Osborne said yesterday that the BBC should curb the imperial ambitions of its website as the corporation was left reeling by a demand to slash its budget by more than £500 million. Let's take a quick look at what's happening around the country here today. We start in Johannesburg, where 4 men who were allegedly involved in a shooting at a tavern in Pinetown that left 4 people dead are expected to appear in the Vereniging Magistrates Court. Still in the City of Gold, suspended Independent Police Investigative Director of Head Robert McBride is expected to make a formal application to his disciplinary hearing for the stay of proceedings pending a court challenge. That's in the news here in South Africa now. Johan Sibia, Managing Director of the music production company under which Soul Brothers leader singer David Masondo recorded his last record, says he's been inundated with calls following Masondo's death. Local musician and co-founder of the Soul Brothers, David Masondo, died at the Garden City Hospital here in Johannesburg yesterday. He was 65 years old. Sibia says people from all over the continent have called him to express their shock and sadness at Masondo's death. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back with you after a short break.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Siphumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom now. Egypt has been battling escalating insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula following attacks that killed more than 100 people last Wednesday. This is a major challenge for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the former army chief who has pledged to eliminate the militants. Warplanes have been deployed and there were casualties. The attacks have also seen the state prosecutor Hisham Barakat assassinated in a Cairo car bombing, the most senior government official killed so far. Egypt has described the latest attacks as terrorism. Troops regularly come under attack in the Sinai, where jihadists have killed hundreds of policemen and soldiers since the overthrow of Mohamed Morsi. In April, dozens of militants attacked checkpoints, killing 15 soldiers, and on January 25 people, most of them soldiers, were killed in a rocket and car bomb attack on multiple police and army targets. Now, to give us the latest in Egypt, we are joined in our studio in Pretoria by the Egyptian Deputy Ambassador to South Africa, Mr. Monzer Sanim. Very good morning to you, Mr. Sanim. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning to you too.
We saw some attacks on insurgents yesterday, 25 killed. Can you give us the sort of latest update, what is happening in Egypt?
Well, Ibn, as you know, for the past week, Egypt has been facing a tremendous challenge of curbing down on an unprecedented wave of terrorist activities, from Cairo all the way to the Sinai Peninsula. And the operation last night was part of a series of planned operations to curb down on this threat that has been augmenting not only in Egypt, but also in the whole region for the past few months, ranging from Iraq all the way to Tunisia. And I think you also have heard about the attacks in France and in Kuwait as well. So Egypt is not really distinctive from everything that is taking place elsewhere. It's part and parcel of the whole challenge facing not only the Middle East, but is extending as well its arms to reach Europe. And that's where real problems will start arising and augmenting.
Is there the political will for a regional coordinated response against this threat?
There is definitely a political will. We've seen that many times before. The most recent time was when President al-Sisi declared that there is a coalition, an Arab coalition, that has been formed to fight terrorism in the region. And that was directly after the attacks in Libya, where 21 Christian Egyptians were beheaded live on TV. And that is the sort of challenge to our way of life as human beings, to our values, to our principles, to our humanity and dignity, that we cannot just stand still and watch. We have to take an active action. We have to move to curb it down. And Egypt is doing that. It's backed up by the Arab countries since, I think, about 6 months ago when that was declared. It was confirmed in the Arab League Summit, the recent Arab League Summit held in Sharm el-Sheikh. And we are following through with those plans with the support of everybody else.
I want to focus your attention on the Sinai Peninsula, where it seems that the Egyptian government is battling somewhat to deal with insurgency there. Some reports say that there's a lack of expertise in fighting on the part of Egypt. What's your response to that?
Well, I don't know about these reports, but all I know is that the Sinai Peninsula is not an easy territory to work and operate in. And let me remind you of one thing. It took the United States, with all its power, over 10 years to try to get somewhere in Afghanistan. So the demography on that little piece of land, that peninsula, is not easy to navigate. The other issue is that the insurgents, as you know, are not organized. These are separately operating cells in different places fighting a regular army. That's where the challenge is, and that's where it will always be difficult but not impossible. Achievements have been made. They will continue to be made during the coming few days until that threat is neutralized and the country is safe once again, and we manage to move forward and look forward to achieving more to our people in that respect. Whatever the territorial challenges are, the Egyptian army is more than capable of overcoming them. They have done so previously in the 90s, they did it in the 80s as well, and they will do it again now. That I have no doubt regarding.
What do you say about Egypt becoming a breeding ground once again for insurgents, because an idea that the country's regressing back into repression, jailing activists and so forth?
Well, I wouldn't classify it as a breeding ground. Let's take a look at the real situation here. Since 1924, the largest and biggest movement, as in fundamentalist movement, was founded in Egypt. That is a fact that we cannot deny. Now, the ideology of the Brotherhood has been the breeding ground for similar fundamentalist groups all around the world. Now, is Egypt going to breed more of these? No, we are not. We're not becoming, as you have said, we're regressing into an era or a totalitarian state. We are not. Egypt has chosen its leader through democratic elections. It has as well deposed its previous president, as it did back in 2011, by the will of the people. This is not an overthrow. It is a legitimate will that has been implemented. Now, how are we moving and progressing forward? If you take a look at the legislations recently, we were supposed to have a parliamentary election. Unfortunately, the Constitutional Court deemed that the law, in certain aspects of it, does not conform with the new constitution. So consequently, and with respect to the rule of law that we always upheld in Egypt for decades, the law had to be revised, and that's why the government has been forced to delay the parliamentary election. That is just a simple example of how the rule of law is being respected. And if in any country, if you respect the rule of law, then at that point you are definitely moving on a steady track towards establishing the principles of democracy. Now, once you had the presidential elections, and now you move into your second step, which is finalizing and having the parliamentary elections, you already have the two main pillars for a principled democracy. And from there, we would move on in that regard. In addition to that, if you look at the new constitution that the people have approved about a year and a half ago, you're going to find that there is a complete chapter and several sections that are only talking about human rights. Yeah. And human rights not just from the Egyptian perspective, they are human rights from the international perspective, in accordance with our commitments, with our conventions that we have signed at the level of the United Nations and at regional levels as well. And we have been upholding for a very long time now.
I thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Mr. Salim, thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully, we will take this discussion forward at some point in the future. That's the Deputy Ambassador, Egyptian Ambassador here in South Africa, being very forthright and coming forward to confront the problem that is insurgency in Egypt at the moment. Now, another concern is part of a social media campaign to draw attention to human rights failings in Swaziland. Hashtag Swazi Justice has been focused on securing the release of Bheki Makhubu and Thulani Maseko, who were jailed for writing and publishing articles critical of the country's judiciary. Last week, the Supreme Court in Swaziland finally ordered the release of the human rights lawyer and magazine editor who'd been behind bars for more than a year now. Now, before we are joined via Skype from Washington, D.C. by Jeffrey Smith from the hashtag Swazi Justice campaign, let's take a look at a powerful video that inspired so many from around the world to take action and support free speech and an independent judiciary in Swaziland.
Of my defense is that I'm not in contempt of court,
but that the people of Swaziland are treated with contempt
and discussed in this regard. The people of Swaziland
have a right to determine and shape their destiny. If truth be told,
this trial is about the prosecution and persecution of the aspirations of the people of this land
to determine their own destiny democratically and freely.
When freedom is taken away, it becomes the onerous and supreme duty
of man to reclaim it from the oppressor.
For giving up freedom is tantamount to giving away man's right to dignity.
One can have no dignity without his or her freedom.
Without our freedom, we are a people without a soul.
I am willing to pay the severest penalty, even if it means spending more days or even more years in jail.
It is well with my soul.
I accept the penalty with a clean and clear conscience that I did no wrong. Human rights
are inherent,
inalienable,
indivisible,
and inviolable.
This is clearly not the case in
Swaziland.
It is our respectful contention
that the issue here is not
and has never been contempt of court.
The issue is the abuse of the courts
to silence
dissenting voices
in order to suppress
aspirations for democratic change.
The people are yearning for freedom,
democracy,
and justice.
Suppressing ideas
never succeeds in making them go away.
Even if brutal force,
arrest, and other forms of
suppression
are used to silence dissent.
History shows
that penalties do not deter men and women
when their conscience
is aroused.
The path to freedom
goes through prison.
The triumph
of justice over evil is inevitable.
Nothing this court can do
will shake me from my commitment
to simple truth.
Simple justice.
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 Justice. Justice.
Justice. Justice.
Hashtag Swazi Justice. That's been the campaign. Now, representative of that campaign, Jeffrey Smith, got up in the middle of the night in Washington, D.C. I should say a very early good morning to you, Jeffrey. Thank you for joining us and for getting up in the middle of the night.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Jeffrey, just give us your initial reaction to the news that Thulani and Bheki would finally be released from jail last week.
Yeah, I think the decision caught a lot of us by surprise. It was certainly most welcome and certainly a wonderful moment for our friends Thulani and Bheki and their families who had suffered for 15 months while their loved ones, and let's not forget their main breadwinners, languished behind bars. I, for one, rest easier knowing that these two amazing men are free, but I also know that there's a lot of work ahead of us, and the fight is definitely not over. The case of Tulani and Becky that you saw in the video and that we'll be speaking about is unfortunately a mere microcosm and but one example of an ongoing and overall human rights crisis that is currently taking place in Swaziland.
Now, the ruling was a triumph for media on the African continent, but has Swaziland taken a step forward?
Well, I think it's really important to view the release of Tulani and Becky in a broader context. While on the outside looking in, it may look like a big success for strengthening the rule of law and an independent judiciary in Swaziland. But unfortunately, that's not the case. This decision came about amid what is really a judicial crisis in the country. The Chief Justice has been fired because he broke the cardinal rules of Swazi politics. Swaziland's traditional authorities know that their cause is best served by remaining out of the headlines. A lot of the bad publicity that came about this case and the international headlines that this was really garnering paved the way for the Chief Justice to be fired. But getting rid of him hasn't solved the larger problem. The fact is that a democratic constitution is not in place in Swaziland, and activists and journalists continue to be prosecuted and persecuted merely for exercising their basic and fundamental human rights.
How do you take this forward now? How do you escalate matters now that Becky and Tulani are out of prison?
Well, the Swazi Justice Campaign is and always has been about much more than the case of these two imprisoned human rights defenders. It's about the right of citizens to be given the chance to live under fair laws and to speak without fear of deadly reprisal. For 3 decades, King Mswati III has expertly hidden behind the shadows of other African dictators, most notably in the Southern Africa region. But as democracy marches forward across the continent, his regime is now getting the negative publicity it rightly deserves. People are being victimized for their legitimate political pro-democracy views. So we'll continue raising the profile of Swaziland, as others will, with the aim of advancing and promoting basic human rights. And the important thing is that small, largely off-the-grid dictatorships like Swaziland, the authorities there, abuse human rights because they think, number one, no one is going to notice, and number two, even if people do notice, they won't be compelled to make a lot of noise. But the Swazi Justice Campaign will certainly continue making that noise and continue to raise these many instances of human rights defenders that are being imprisoned merely for exercising the basic human rights that you and I, for instance, take for granted.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for joining us live from Washington, D.C. It's 3 a.m. there this morning. Jeffrey got up to join us here on Newsroom to tell us about the work behind the scenes of the hashtag Swazi Justice campaign. Now, here in South Africa, tributes continue to pour in after lead singer of the legendary music group Soul Brothers, David Masondo, passed away. Masondo was rushed to hospital in May, suffering from fatigue after a live performance in Port Elizabeth. He passed away yesterday in the Garden City Hospital. Let's take a look at what you are saying about this legendary performer. Now, Time Mtokozizi's Gumbo says, oh boy, David Masondo is gone. Became a fan of the Soul Brothers by virtue of being a Bulawayo fella. He'll be sorely missed. Rest in peace. Shirley Machene says, David Masondo, Soul Brothers, rest in peace. Your contribution in African music was truly inspiring. Khaifele Treasure M says, rest in peace, David Masondo. Comfort and provision of all the family and close ones need. Grateful for the talent shared with us. Ngolisi says, shocked by the passing of David Mbuzu Masondo. Soul Brothers, may soul rest in peace. Great entertainer. Those are just some of the comments on the passing of David Masondo. Of course, there have been many, many more on social media. Now, let's take a look at what's happening on Newsroom Facebook page today. AMCU is set to reject an increase of between 450 and 1,000 rand that gold mining companies have offered their members. AMCU members gave their negotiating teams a mandate to stick to the union's key demand of 12,500 rand in report-back meetings at the weekend. Then President Jacob Zuma says SADC needs to establish a regional parliament to allow for people's participation in tackling challenges that face the region. This 37th SADC Parliamentary Forum started in Durban this morning. And China is confident that Greece's economy will turn around with the hard work of all parties, according to Deputy Foreign Minister there. But the minister would not say if the Greek Prime Minister could attend an emerging powers summit later in the week in Russia. Now, to point out to you, July is Nelson Mandela month and International Mandela Day. The late South African president's birthday is on the 18th of July. Now, in honor of this, a new widget has been launched by SABC Digital News. The Mandela Diaries is a widget that started as an effort to digitize Madiba's journeys when he was alive. Let's take a look at this short clip.
From humble beginnings, this selfless icon altered the history of the world, freed a country, and united a nation. He taught us humility and forgiveness. To the world, he is Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. But to us, he is simply Tata Madiba.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. Streets in Mamelodi, northeast of Pretoria, are reported to be filled with police who are trying to ensure that buses are allowed to operate. More than 20 police vehicles are parked outside the local depot, and 2 police vehicles are escorting each bus. A public meeting was held yesterday to resolve the standoff over bus routes. Now, for the latest in Mamelodi, we are joined by our reporter, Patricia Fasachi. A very good morning to you, Patricia. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Yevon.
Patricia, just give us a quick update. I understand that some taxis were also impounded this morning, and in this situation, is it quite tense?
Well, certainly you are correct, Evan. A lot of taxis were impounded this morning as part of Operation Fiela that obviously intensified since the Premier's announcement yesterday that he will not allow any unruly elements in Mamelodi and that he will do everything in his power to ensure that the law and order is ensured in the township, and of course that all the commuters are also safe and the residents of Mamelodi can get what they have been calling for, and that is a safe community, of course, after the violence that we saw that erupted last week. But to talk more about the taxis that were impounded, I am now joined by 2 Mamelodi taxi executives who will just give us their reaction as to how do the taxi industry in the area feel after all those taxis were impounded. And right here on my right hand side, I am joined by by Stemmer Munaghe. So just give us your reaction as to how your association feels about this.
Now, we all feel very bad about the situation that happened this morning, because it was unfortunate, the statement that made by the Premier yesterday, which he made the statement before he can get to the details of what the actual taxi industry is looking for. So it was an unfortunate situation, and we are not happy about it, because it will provoke our people, because we have tried to come to, we are on the table with the leaders of the department and ourselves, been engaging until last night, 12 o'clock in the midnight. So we have tried to get hold of the MEC Vadi to stop this operation here, because we have made the statement of a ceasefire, because we are in a good terms with the department as we speak now. So it's an unfortunate situation, because it happened before we can even report to our members. We condemn the statement of the Premier yesterday.
And you, Bonnie and Zinche, if we can just hear from you as well, your association, what's their reaction after this?
Actually, my members, they're not happy at all, and we are looking at this like as the government is fighting against the taxi industry, and we have got the support of the South region and the local. But what we are looking at now is that we've got good news for our members to report today, but it seems like somebody is a third force who's trying to destroy what is happening in Mamelodi. We are good people in Mamelodi, and then there's this statement, military statement, which is made by the Premier yesterday. We are not happy about it, and then we condemn it. And then it's unfortunate to be there and talk such things, and it's also, he was informed. You can see that he was not ready to help the people. We need people who can bring solutions in Mamelodi. But by doing and pounding our cars is not a solution.
All right. Thank you so much. There you have it from the Mamelodi taxi executives giving their dissatisfaction after many taxis were impounded very early this morning by Operation Fiela. Of course, as that continue, the Autopax buses will also, for the rest of the day and the rest of the week, continue to operate under heavy police guard. Back to you, Eben.
Thank you very much, Patricia Fisaki, on the scene there at the taxi rank. Public transport vehicles being escorted by police in the capital? Somewhat disturbing, isn't it? What do you think? Well, more meetings are set for today to try and arrest the situation. Now, to talk to us about the escalating crisis in Mamelodi, we are joined by the Executive Mayor of the City of Tshwane, Councillor Khosenzo Ramokgopa. Very good morning to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Eben, and morning to the viewers. Thank you very much for the invitation.
I just overheard taxi representatives talking about a ceasefire. Is the capital under siege? Are we in terms of war?
Well, not exactly, but we can't deny the fact that there have been major disruptions to public transport, in particular the Autopax buses. There's been attacks, there have been shootings on the Padco bus. So it required for extraordinary measures, and that's why the Premier came through to make sure that he engages with the commuters and the community of Mamelodi, and also continue the engagement with the taxi industry. Obviously, it's a regrettable state of affairs, but we want to ensure that we are able to protect life, limb, and property, whilst at the same time creating an opportunity for the taxi industry to participate meaningfully in the subsidized public transport market. So we're looking forward to those engagements. We are hopeful that the peace that has been established this morning will be enduring, whilst it allows for conversation to happen. I'm more than optimistic that they will succeed in our endeavor to ensure that we arrest the situation.
Now the Premier, Gauteng Premier, yesterday was quite stern in how this matter was going to be resolved. Do you agree with him on how to proceed?
Oh yes, I think the priority must be to ensure that there's no injury, there's no damage to property, there's no loss of life. Two is that we must allow people's lives to continue with minimum disruptions. Three is that people must have an option to use whatever mode of public transport that is convenient to them. So those are the areas that the Premier came to address, whilst at the same time emphasizing the point that we'll continue to seek these solutions and through conversation with the taxi industry. So it's important that we are able to normalize the situation. I mean, quite quite frankly, the state can't fold its arms when the vulnerable, the poor are under attack. The state has got a responsibility to make sure that it normalizes the situation. We are able to create conditions of peace. And it is these conditions that are going to carry us through the dialogue that we are going to have with the industry. As I speak to you, we are readying ourselves to go and continue this conversation with the industry this afternoon. You would have heard from your report from the leadership of the industry. They've been having this conversation until midnight yesterday. So this is a clear demonstration of our unwavering commitment to ensure that we find long-lasting peace to the situation in Mamelodi before it gets to flare up across the length and breadth of the province.
Mr. Mayor, you've got 1 minute to tell us about your expectations of this meeting this afternoon and how crucial this is for lasting peace.
Well, one is that allow Autopex to continue as the current dispensation makes it possible for them for this arrangement to be in place for 3 months. And then secondly, the city of Tshwane will work together with the taxi industry to put together a financially sound, technically cogent submission for consideration to provincial government, so that once this dispensation comes to an end, there could be a consideration within the framework of the law on how best to accommodate the industry. Obviously, it's a function of how the province is able to evaluate that submission. So I'm confident about the prospects of finding long and enduring peace in this area.
Mr. Mayor, I thank you for coming out firstly today and at short notice come to confront this issue right here on television with us. Thank you. That is the Executive Mayor of the capital of South Africa, the city of Tshwane, Councillor Kgotsientsho Ramokgopa. Join us live there from our studios in Pretoria. Now, we end off today with a video of the late David Masondo performing one of the Soul Brothers' most well-known songs, Mama Ka Sibongile. Of course, the show is broadcast live every day between 9 and 10 a.m. Don't forget, we love it in the morning.
Uyabona manje nginikhumbuza kudala siyezwana nginikhumbuza mzukwane siyezwana zithi mama ngasibongile akuyeke ukuthi mawusuphuzile esuyangiphoxa angithi kunjalo mama ngasibongile akuyeke ukuthi mawusuphuzile esuyangiphoxa mina ngifuna